Hey guys, welcome back. So this is where we were last time. So we're sort of like going to start this from scratch. So I'm just going to make a Lambert and I'm going to assign that to this guy over here. And going to go edit, delete unused nodes, and that's going to get rid of everything that is not being used on the scene. So file, save scene as, and going to call this Hair Polys. Alrighty, so you already got the basics. So the first thing we're gonna do, you already know how to export a UV layout and all that stuff. So the first thing we're gonna do is just also close this and just save it. I'm gonna save this under textures. And we're gonna make a new scene again, and this one's gonna be 512 by 512. So we got this basic image here. Now to do hair, what we need to do is sort of something sort of like this with a very simple brush. If you have a Wacom, it's gonna be a lot better. You start doing this. Now, as you can see, it would take a long time to do a clump if I'm gonna do things the way I'm doing it right now. So to maximize your workflow, what we're gonna do is just make a new layer here. Delete that, and I'm gonna call this background base and fill it up with white. Okay. So what we're gonna do is make a new brush. And how do you make a new brush? You can make a new file and make it small. 100 by 100 is probably fine. And with this guy, with that basic brush, the very simple one, you can start just clicking. Of course, with a black color, start clicking. So I'm just gonna make it a little bit bigger and gonna make it a little bit softer, and gonna start this from scratch because I'm gonna be using my Wacom. So you start drawing out your hairs. It's like a little clump of hairs with different thickness, different widths, different opacities. I'll make a couple of small ones just for the hell of it. There we go. And once you have that, you can go to Edit, Define Brush Preset, and call this Hair Brush 1. Alright, and then we delete that, and we're gonna make another one. So back to the brush, and we're gonna come back to this number 1. Just gonna take the hardness back down, maybe the diameter a little bit up, and I'm gonna make another one with less. So maybe one over there, and then one over there, and another one over there, and here and there. Maybe a little bit thicker. There we go. And file. Edit. Define brush preset. Hair brush 2. And Control A, delete M and B, and come back to this guy one more time, and one more time, hardens down. And this one is just gonna have a couple ones. Maybe one there, one there, one there, and another one there. And just very slight, very transparent couple of ones. And again, edit, define brush preset, hair brush 3. And and I think that's it. So nope, we're not gonna save that. And what we just did was 3 brushes. They're here, A, B, and C. And we need to change some settings, because if we grab them and we paint, that looks like that, this one looks like that, and that one looks like that. So they don't really look like hair at all. So how do we adjust them? Well, what we do is we select the brush that we're going to be adjusting. Start with hairbrush 1, and we come to the brush presets, or the brushes, and we activate other dynamics, and we activate shape dynamics. And mainly we come here to brush tip shape, and we take the spacing down. So now there's no spacing. Under shape dynamics, we want the size to be jittered by the pressure of the pen. Under other dynamics, we can change the opacity to be also changed depending on the pressure of the pen. So now we can do something that works a little bit better. So Control A, backspace. Just gonna make a new layer again. Come back to my layers and just fill this up with white. Make a new layer. I'll call this tests and brush. So now again, so we can see it a little bit better. This looks like that. So now it looks a lot better, and you can always change your sizes and stuff. Alright, so that's one brush. Then we need to adjust the other brush. So select the other brush and come back to the brushes, and again, shape dynamics, other dynamics, and spacing. So now this brush can give us something that's like the little hairs, smaller versions of hair. And come back to the last one, and shape dynamics, other dynamics, pen pressure, and no spacing. And again, if we draw this one, that's what we're getting off the bat. So make it smaller, and we can add an extra set of brushes or of hairs. Now, see, I selected that one and I'm back to the default. That's because I didn't save them. So it's a good idea to save them. So shift dynamics, other dynamics, brush tip, spacing down. And once you have it adjusted and it works, then you go to the brush and you click on this little icon here, and it's gonna make a new brush. So grab one. That's gonna be over there, so I can actually select this guy and delete brush. So now that one's the one I want. And back to brushes. Select this guy one more time, shape dynamics, other dynamics, brush tip down. And come here and make a new one. Hit OK. And delete this guy. And now this guy, shape, other, brush, and yep, and delete this guy. There we go. So now we're ready to start working. So with these brushes, we already talked about the direction of our UV layout. That was coming from down up. So from this point on, show our layers. We will select our little brush here. And we can do a black color. You can even randomize the colors if you want, but we can always do that later. So we can make a little hair clump. Of course you want to have variation between, so you might want to make more than one texture. This is just a sample, but the principle is not really that complicated. It's just defining a look, and that's all you do. Once you define your look, you're good to go. You can use the other brush just to have some random hairs here and there, make it a little bit more messy. And the more time you spend, of course, the better the result. I'm not going to spend too much because it's just to get the principle out. Alright, let's call that a go. So this, we're going to call this base. Now, this is pretty much just transparency at this point. I want to adjust that base a little bit. A little bit more solid. And if you want to have a separate layer that's color only, you can totally do that. Just gonna come here and okay, I'm not gonna get too fancy here. I'm just gonna select a couple of colors. Just gonna make a little palette right there. And alright, so that way I can start painting this. Take my opacity down a tad. The foundation here. if you want to, you can always set this to multiply. So set to lighten. And I'm just going to do a little black color so that I can see my palette there. And yeah, you can always use anything you want. You want to give it more randomness. That's if you want. Take this opacity down here. Just gonna blend all these guys together. So I'm just gonna make a big blur. Filter, blur, Gaussian. And I think that's pretty good. So what happens there is with that base color, just take this back to normal. I can select my base and go to select, load selection, transparency, and come to this color one and reverse the selection and press backspace. And then I got myself something that has some color. And if I want to multiply, for example, I can come to the gradient tool and maybe add just a black, make a new layer, make that base a little bit darker. And it's a good idea to make your base darker because hair tends to get pretty dark at the base. And again, simply come to base, select, load selection, transparency, come here, Control Shift I, backspace, and we can set this to a multiply. And there we go. So with that, we can select these guys, Control G, and we're gonna call this hair color transp. And I don't want my base visible, I don't need it, I just want this guy's visible there. And I'm gonna make a duplicate to, might as well get over the specular, done. So this is gonna be black. All this specular. So that's the base, and let's take these guys to normal, and let's see if we can give it a bit of a texture by putting this guy on top there. Not really. Let's put this guy on top, and Control Shift U, and change the levels a little bit, see if we can. I like that one better. I'm just going to set this one to multiply. So it just darkens up that base there. And let's see if this one's doing anything. No. There we go. And then we have the bump, so I'm just going to duplicate that and call this bump. And the bump is, there's no bump there. We just want this, guys. So let's see if we can adjust the levels. Actually, let's hide this and show this guy. It's inverted. And let's see if we can mix and match a couple of these guys here. Let's change the levels. That should be fine. Okay, so once we got all these guys, I'm just going to save this again as an IFF under source images, poly hair bump, oops, poly hair poly hair. This is the bump channel. This is the specular channel. I'm not too happy about that specular, but okay. Control Shift S as an IFF poly hair spec, and Control Shift S poly hair color transp. Okay, one thing to point out is not usually, most of the time in CS4 when you save as an IFF with transparencies, it works fine, but sometimes where things are too feathery like that, it just doesn't like it, and then you just get this weird look. If we were to get that, and we don't know because that's the whole purpose of this tutorial, is to see the trouble that sometimes arises, then we'll change this hair color and we'll break it into color and transparency. Alright, but for now let's hope it works. So let's go save as, and let's save this under textures, and we can call this hair clump 1. Now come here, and we're going to bring in those three guys, and we're going to change our Lambert to a, let's do a blend again. Although an anisotropic is pretty good for hair, but blends and fonts tend to do just a great job at it. And let's move these guys over here to the side and select our blend, and let's take the color and transparency down to the default, the specular to the specular color, and the bump to the bump channel. And let's take the bump value a lot less, 0.002. It's something should be very slight, and that's where we get there. Let's go ahead and render skip that image, render perspective. And we can increase a little bit the bump, 0.01. .1. Be serious. That's a little bit too much, but let's do 0.5. Might want to have a little bit more randomness on. Okay, this is happening in part because of the specular, but mainly because the color. If you look at the color, see, that's got a white background automatically. So maybe painting more past the transparency area is a good idea. Okay, so that takes care of the foundation of hair. So once you have that, then let's go ahead and file. I'm just gonna save this scene as hair clump. And go ahead and import the scalp that we were working on. So to put him here, what we do is, I'm just gonna smooth this guy. So polymodeling tools and just going to smooth. I'm gonna smooth it twice. We put the pivot point somewhere around there, and we can change the shape of this. So I'm just gonna rotate it up. And we can give it a little bit of thickness so that it doesn't look so boring. So what that allows is that, you know, from different angles it looks, and if you had more transparency and you had again more shapes, then it's just time consuming. It's not really complicated. Okay, so with that we select the mesh and we make it live, and we make it live by clicking here, and then we select this guy, and that way it's just gonna slide around his head. And then you just need to have a whole bunch of these guys. And you start just changing the shape. And if you had different textures, again, of course the result's going to be that much better. So as you can see, it's not really complicated. It's just tedious and time consuming. And that is the reason why we're talking about hair today and not the last week, which is really when hair should be covered. But it wouldn't really give you time to be working on hair. So it's better if you know it ahead of time and you're able to start working on it and go working little by little on it. So well, you know, it's not the greatest transparency in the world, but now let's go ahead and come to rendering. I'm going to add a direction light, so move it up, and to unlive him, just don't select anything, select empty space and click the make live icon. So this takes care of the first half of hair. There's still a little bit more that needs to be done. Use ray trace shadows on and render perspective. So you start getting some transparency there. Look at the alpha. You start getting some transparency and breaking that silhouette up. And that's really what hair is about. One thing to point out with mentor ray is that whenever you have surfaces that have transparency, you need to go into the material that has that transparency, and you need to come down to ray tracing options, and you need to take off shadow attenuation, all the way dragging down to 0. And what that's going to do is, if you look at these guys over here, it's going to get rid of that. So it's going to actually look transparent. Alright, so with that principle, You can make a mohawk, or you can make you just time consuming. That's all. It's just time consuming. I can adjust the transparency maybe a little bit. Let's try doing that just to finalize this. Go ahead and oops. So I'm gonna close that up. Come here and just gonna bring the eraser and use this as my eraser, and I'm gonna make it more transparent looking. Maybe that improves it a little bit, because it's really about being able to see through all the planes. So let's go ahead and save that as a IFF, undersource images, color transparency 1. Okay, minimize this, close that, and let's just change that texture here under textures. Let's see if we have a better feel now. Yeah, so now we're getting a little bit more transparency, so our silhouette gets broken up even more. One thing you want to do with the UV layout is just select all your planes and scale the UV layout tad bit in, not that much, just a little bit like so, so it's not touching the edge, because sometimes when you get that, then that's why you see these lines over there. There we go, so no more lines. And the last part, that all this takes care of the silhouette. The last part is making the base of the head have the same texture or the same color. That again, you need to work together with the texture, so you can do that. But in this case, it's not like I have a UV layout. Oh, I do have a UV layout of the head. Okay, but I'm not gonna do that. I'll worry about that in once we talk about texturing. But for now, I'm just gonna take the specular color down for a second and take this color. I'm gonna try and match it to that one as close as I can. And of course, the closer the match, the better the result. Because once you don't see that line, that's when things are groovy. I'm still seeing a little bit of that line. The whole trick here is to not see that, and that's why you really want to pay attention to making the base color and the color of your hair be as close as possible, because that's when you get a seamless texture. Okay, so that I think is everything when it comes to making hair. Principal stand is just coming up with a good design for hair, and I did short, but you can do long hair same way. So if you are doing, I'll just finalize with that. If you are doing long hair, then you make yourself that curve that I was talking about, and you duplicate it. Just gonna put them over here. I'm going to change the UVs. Actually, I'm going to show you a trick. If you select these curves and you go to the surfaces, edit curves, modify curves, lock length, you can select the last, and their lengths are locked, so it's kind of cool because it's really easy to get a shape because all of them are working together. And back to edit curves, unlock length, and then surface, edit nerves. I'm gonna keep it simple like that, and just go surfaces, loft. We'll change some settings on that. There we go. So we have a UV layout there, and if we were to do that UV mapping again on this shape, let's see if this guy works. No, that guy's not gonna work. It's gonna come here for a sec, make a new texture. Let's make it 512 by 512, and it's probably gonna be very thin. So I'm just gonna make a new layer here. Just make it all the way black. There we go. And I'm gonna make my background black. I'm gonna show you. No, I'm just gonna keep it like that, and Control Shift S as an IFF. Poly, hair, color, transparency 2. Okay. You can even use only the transparency channel on Maya. So bring in that texture and select this, assign textures material to selection. I just need to adjust my UV layout. Just change that shader. So there you go. So if you again have a lot of those, or different textures, then you start getting something more interesting. Okay, I'm gonna cut it right there. So I hope you got to understand. I apologize that it's a long tutorial, but you know, hair is not complicated, it just takes a while. And I'll see you next time with the next tutorial. Bye.